I cannot believe this Mad Season show video actually eluded me for 7 months. The complete history of every WoW killer. Surely, in 20 years, one video game, one MMORPG has managed to dethrone World of Warcraft. Kick out.
In November of 2004, Blizzard Entertainment unleashed the World of Warcraft upon an unsuspecting world, and the MMORPG genre would never be the same. What began as a polished and casual-friendly evolution exploded into this cultural colossus. By 2008, it commanded 12 million subscribers, which was
we're old
the
guys.
Population of many nations.
It's over.
It became more than a game, and more of this second home, except without another premium currency in order to buy items for the home. Its accessibility, its stylized art that aged gracefully, intuitive questing, and overall a very polished experience made it the undisputed king. However, this crown would also paint a bullseye on Blizzard's back, as every major publisher saw the same dollar signs, and they dreamed of dethroning the Titan. Whether claimed by these developers themselves or by their fervent fans, the term WoW killer became the industry's most seductive buzzword, and so the question became, if Blizzard could bottle lightning, why not them? And so, over the next 2 decades, a parade of challengers armed with billion-dollar IPs and revolutionary mechanics and marketing budgets that rivaled Hollywood marched forth to claim the throne. Each was promised to be the one, and each, in the end, learned the same lesson.
Guild Wars 1.
In today's video, we cover the story of these would-be usurpers.
Damn, what is that?
The games that dared to dream and to be crowned the new king of the MMO.
Old MMOs had spirit. Like, looking at this, I get nostalgic without even playing these games. It's insane. Like, I played probably every single free-to-play MMO. I played MU. Most of you guys probably never even heard of it, unless you travel to the deepest chasms of Korea. But other than that, like, it's insane. Like, look at that. It's so beautiful. It truly had spirit. I think what we lack today in world design, and especially in MMORPGs, is that. We lack the uniqueness. We lack the world feeling like home. Now everything feels like it's the modern slop you constantly have to slog your way through just to get to the under end of the quest that does not matter. Like, that's the problem, man. Game lacks spirit. I'm onto it. I'm telling you, you need to give me how much Steven Sharif had? $150 million? And I'll make you a good MMORPG, guys. Just, like, donate it to me, okay? I won't buy a mansion on a faraway land. I won't use it to hire a personal chef. Just trust me, okay? I won't even scam my brother.
RPG.
Maybe. I don't know. Depends.
But I guess those scrubs should have learned how to code. Unfortunately,
is that a commercial?
The premier backend web development platform, boot.dev.
Okay, I respect the hustle. I won't skip it. I won't skip it. I respect the hustle.
Learning back
I love Mad Season show.
Sometimes feel like
I love him.
Grind. And
he's a man of commitment and sheer will.
World first Bloodsill Admiral, rank 14, monotonous Adonis loves that. What if I told you that there's a way to make it as fun and as engaging as a video game?
But
with boot.dev,
Asian MMOs were paid to win, and then they're paid to win now because pay to win is acceptable in like Far East Asia.
It's designed to keep you engaged.
It's like normal there. I think most Western people won't agree to
day one. Solving
like
challenges,
pay to win is fine.
Projects,
right?
Plus, it's self-paced.
It is what
so
it is.
You can learn when it suits you. As you complete challenges, you'll earn XP, levels, and achievements, all while preparing for.
Wait, maybe I can make my own MMO.
Development. And if
wait,
you
that's
get
getting
stuck,
interesting.
They have an active Discord community as well as an AI guide boot to
AI
tricky concepts. If you're interested, click the link in the description and use
guys,
my
maybe
code
I'll make
to
my
get
own MMO.
25%
I don't
off
need your
first
money.
month, or even your entire first year if you go for the annual plan. But anyways, back to the video. Before we begin, since we do have quite a number of contestants to go through, I'll have to keep each criminally brief, which can feel like a disservice to fans of these games, but I think in the future I would like to cover them all more in depth, one by one, than what you see here. And saying that just because they failed to take down one of the most popular video games of all time as people predicted or hoped, it doesn't mean that they were or are necessarily bad. Even if they aren't as massive as people would have hoped, many of them are still running today, and they're great games in their own right. And I'll try my best to do each of them justice. With that being said, we'll be going in chronological order, starting with The Lord of the Rings Online.
I never play that. I don't know. Whoa, the music. What the? Whoa. That's some serious banger. Wait, is that from Lord of the Rings Online?
And released on April 24th, 2007.
I'm gonna put it on my
Crusade
soundtrack.
Is a few months old, and World of Warcraft at this point has firmly established themselves as the dominant MMORPG. And here comes one of the most popular nerd fantasy IPs ever made.
I don't know how I never played that.
You have this IP that's worshipped by nerds, debuting in what is possibly the nerdiest
Wait, do we have
genre of
captions?
game possible.
No.
And during the breakout of the genre, where it was reaching these new levels of popularity and breaking records every single day, it was a regular old nerdgasm. Lord of the Rings Online, or LOTRO as it's referred to, tapped into one of the most iconic fantasy franchises ever created, and one that was also recently revitalized by Peter Jackson's film trilogy. It promised an immersive digital playground for fans craving to explore the Shire, or
I mean, if
Orcs
it costed
Moria,
money,
or
then
even
that's
the
probably the
Fellowship's
reason.
narrative. Beta testers flooded blogs and forums with glowing reports.
It looks
and
good.
praising its faithful adaptation to Tolkien's lore.
No, it looks
Reviewers
good.
highlighted interesting systems like the Deed system, which were achievement-like tasks that rewarded exploration, combat, and role-playing, as well as providing stat-boosting traits that allowed for some form of character customization. There's also a unique PvP mode where players could temporarily switch to controlling the realm's evil creatures, and in particular, the game's story-driven quests felt more narrative-rich than World of Warcraft's kind of grindy equivalent, which in turn would draw in more role players and lore enthusiasts. So even though the Burning Crusade was pushing the game to new levels of popularity, many saw LOTRO as the next big thing, thus labeling it the first serious WoW killer. They looked at it as this refined evolution of the MMORPG formula that could lure away dissatisfied players tied to Azeroth's more lightweight and cartoonish style. The marketing leaned quite heavily on the IP's popularity, teasing this living world where players could influence the events tied to the Lord of the Rings timeline and interacting with its iconic heroes, which was a very alluring draw and a nice match for the genre itself. And so, pre-orders surged, and the initial sales were quite strong, with estimates suggesting that hundreds of thousands of subscribers would be its peak.
Interesting.
And notably, unlike many other MMO releases at the time, the launch
just
was
beats him with
relatively
a staff.
stable. Yet, despite this initial fervor, LOTRO ultimately failed to unseat World of Warcraft, and it ended up settling into a respectable but still niche existence. And this,
To be fair, they have competed against World of Warcraft at its peak. So we gotta put that into perspective, right? That is impressive. They pulled some serious numbers. I'm actually surprised.
was partly due to the game itself and just due to World of Warcraft's overwhelming popularity.
Yeah,
As at
it
this point in
already
time,
exploded
there
at
were
this
over
point.
8 million subscribers. It just simply proved to be insurmountable.
And 2008.
As Blizzard's game had already captured the mainstream
Damn, I think that's the time where video game journalists actually played video games. That's crazy, dog. Wow, that's insane.
with its accessibility and addictive loop and broad appeal. While LOTRO certainly had its strengths, for many it really just boiled down to the gameplay and the combat, simply lacking the extreme amount of polish that World of Warcraft had. It just didn't feel as reactive and fun. The graphics at the time were quite impressive and detailed, but because of this they were also more demanding, which created issues with accessibility that World of Warcraft was able to overcome with its sort of cartoonish but still efficient graphics that...
Man, the realism in Lord of the Rings Online, man, it killed PCs back in the day. What was the average PC back in the day? It was 2008, right? What was the average PC? I remember having 430 GTX, but I think it's like way later even. I remember when I took it out of my PC to upgrade it to a 650 Ti, mind you, and I'm not even kidding you. It was literally this size, and it was, no, you're gonna clip that. I meant the graphic card. Oh, man. Oh, I'm such a trash streamer. Never mind. Please don't clip that, okay? So, anyway, the graphic cards. The graphic card had one fan. Literally one fan, and that's it. It was crazy. I still remember it to this day. Yeah, dual-core CPU were monsters. Yeah, absolutely.
ran smoothly even on modest hardware.
8 GB of RAM? Who had 8? I had 2. I remember I moved from 2 to 4. And that was crazy.
A key factor for its widespread adoption is people weren't really interested in paying $1,000 to $2,000 for a computer before they could even start playing an MMO. Many felt that marketing had its shortcomings, as they felt like they relied too much on the Lord of the Rings brand and failed to really promote the actual gameplay and innovations that the MMO itself held, assuming that the IP's fame would suffice. And on the other side, Blizzard at this point were pouring a lot of resources into expansions and
so young and brimming with life,
such as their own personal convention, BlizzCon, to name just one. The endgame, though it was innovative in spots, lacked World of Warcraft's depth and polish and replayability, which would cause retention drops after the initial honeymoon and players hit the max level. By the year 2010, declining numbers had forced a shift into the free-to-play model, which was often seen as the death sentence of the MMO genre. The game's focus on lore and immersion appealed to quite a dedicated fan base, but...
Is there even a free-to-play MMO that made it? I'm actually not sure. I can't remember. Like, free-to-play MMO, you know it's a death sentence. It's capital punishment for your MMO. I'm trying to remember. For Wildstar, it killed the game. For, wait, what was else? Like, Lord of the Rings Online, I guess, too? Runes of Magic, it's still... Wait, is Wizard 101 free or not? I think it is, right? So maybe for Wizard 101 it works. And like, I don't know. Yeah, they all end up dying if they're free to play. It really depends. I guess maybe it can work. Like, it can work.
It just wasn't able to capitalize beyond that. It wasn't bad by any means, and it still isn't.
Albion, right, Albion.
Unlike some of the games in this list that you'll see, it didn't have this catastrophic launch or a fundamentally flawed, unfixable gameplay design that doomed it before it even hit store shelves. It was just very similar to World of Warcraft in its setting, structure of this theme park, linear MMORPG that attempted all of the things that World of Warcraft perfected, but not quite being able to reach its level, which just left many players feeling like they were playing an inferior, less populated version of what was then the cultural phenomenon, World of Warcraft. And it was...
Yeah, MapleStory free-to-play Kekel. I think there's a reason why every free-to-play MMO that somehow made it is, like, East Asian, right? Because they're accepting pay-to-win. And that's the only way you can reliably sustain yourself off a free-to-play MMO.
Because of this, that it was mostly the hardcore fans of the IP who were the ones that stuck around. Today, it still endures as a beloved cult classic, and it continues to get updates and expansions and introducing more content to keep things fresh. And it's quite loved by those who play it, and for good reason, even bearing witness to modern attempts failing before they even release. Shoutouts to Amazon.
Classic. Good old Jeff.
What now, my lord?
Now we sound the bells of war.
Is that Conan?
In 2005, Funcom announced their stake into the MMO genre with the Age of Conan, Hyborian Adventures, developed by Funcom and published by Eidos. The game drew from Robert E. Howard's iconic Conan the Barbarian universe, promising a gritty and mature fantasy world that contrasted sharply with World of Warcraft's more whimsical tone. Its key features...
You know, I always love other developers for trying, right? At least they tried. Nowadays, it feels like nobody tries anymore. It's like one game managed to break the glass ceiling and every other company jumps on that bandwagon and tries to copy it. They don't even try to innovate on the genre. It happened with MOBAs, it happened with Battle Royales, and now we're seeing it with extraction shooters. Like, there won't be an end to it. Every company tried to imitate instead of innovate. That's such a massive problem, and it's industry-wide. I think that's why the next big MMORPG and, like, video game, and we see it especially with, like, single-player video games right now, will come from Eastern developers, because they're actually willing to innovate. And that doesn't happen anymore in Western companies, unfortunately. And that's why they suck. Did you try Elder Scrolls Online? No, I hate Skyrim and everything related to it.
Perhaps the main one being
it's just a me thing.
Innovative real-time combat system. Instead of the standard tab targeting that most other MMOs relied on, Age of Conan's was in real time with no auto attack but instead requiring button presses to swing in 3 different directions and having to physically hit enemies with your weapon if you're playing a melee character. There was also the guard system, where enemies would devote defense to either of these 3 points of attack, preventing the spamming of one direction, and adding a strategy element where players would have to try to work around their defenses, or alternatively, dodging away in order to avoid some damage. You could weave attacks together to create smooth combos.
Oh shit, wait, I got a sub. Thank you so much. Wait, why did I get an alert? I should have gotten oh man, are you kidding me? I should have gotten an alert. I don't know why. I think I muted it. I'm so stupid. No, wait, I should have seen that on screen. Okay, never mind. Something's weird. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much, LeSpooky. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it. I'm sorry. There should have been an alert on screen. I thought I fixed it. I guess not. Okay, interesting. Interesting. Thank you, though.
And finish fights with brutal decapitations straight out of more.
Are you playing WoW Hardcore? No, I wanted to start playing WoW Hardcore, but I feel like if I'm started doing it right now, I'll kind of be seen as a poser who's trying to jump on the bandwagon, because like, you know, I'm kind of a washed up, but it is what it is. I'm only like in the early days of my streaming, right? I'm still in diapers. I've only been streaming for 2 months, so I'm trying to get my foot in the water, see like what works, what isn't. Maybe I'll stream World of Warcraft to Hardcore one day, surely.
Mortal Kombat. All of this was marketed to be revolutionary compared to the usual tab targeting system, and it would be the main thing that the game would stake its claim on, as if it were the adult version of the genre, and everything else was kiddie by comparison. Going further, it fully embraced mature themes.
You're doing pretty good, thank you, man. Thank you so much.
Including nudity, gore, and profanity to appeal to an adult audience tired of the rather sanitized entries being offered within the genre. It touted voice-acted quests with strong narrative depth, over 800
I'm on EU, by the way.
Solo dungeons, immersive storytelling with
oh damn, you could write a mammoth?
And massive zones to explore, endgame raids to conquer, and PvP elements like massive sieges and guild cities.
I'm not gonna lie, this game looks good.
Warfare. The class system itself was interesting, focusing more on a hybrid style. There were 4 main archetypes, soldiers being the frontline fighters, rogues for the more agile-based DPS, mages for ranged spellcasting, and priests for healers. As mentioned, there were 12 in total, with a lot of them being hybrids, such as the Bear Shaman, which is a melee fighter, but also heals. Industry Buzz positioned it as the next evolution, like with many of the entries that you'll see in this video, with beta testers praising its hybrid classes and visceral gameplay. The hype for Age of Conan was absolutely unreal, earning rewards upon rewards for pre-release screening at conventions, and its initial sales reflected this fervor, nearing 1 million copies and drawing a very large player base eager for a fresh, skill-based alternative to World of Warcraft. And looking back today, for many, this particular period of time,
the music is
sort of representative of the MMO gold rush's
My
pinnacle,
God.
and where the term WoW killer was really being thrown around quite a lot.
Yeah, dude, these were the days. Look at this. You can literally count the pixels on one hand. What is that? It's so good. It is so good. It's crazy how far we've come, though, right? You can probably play all of these games on your phone nowadays, which is absolutely crazy. But man, this brings some serious memories. I love that. Grainy videos, you had to guess what happened on your screen based on prior knowledge. It was good, dude. We had it so good. We did not evaluate like what we had back in the day. It's so crazy.
However, Age of Conan unfortunately crumbled under its own ambitions.
This is what happens whenever it locks up.
I mean, it's not even worse than now in the current Blizzard, I'm not gonna lie.
To beat other competitors such as Warhammer Online, which was on the horizon. It ended up shipping incomplete, with polished content only up to level 20 to 30, and after that many dead spots between quests that forced tedious grinding, and the game as a whole becoming progressively more and more buggy and clearly unfinished further than that.
The hell is that?
Bugs, server instability, and high system requirements caused lag and crashes. In its first week, it had a huge memory leak issue, which required players to manually delete a file every 5 minutes during gameplay, or else they would suffer a crash. not quite what the players had in mind with its so-called interactive combat.
Man,
and outside of combat,
man, this video is not good for my health. I'm old. I'm so old. It's crazy. Just the music takes me away. I get nostalgic for games I did not even play. That's crazy. Crazy how good this video is.
Crafting system in particular was a mess, barely passing as functional for the features that were implemented, with many others promised, such as the guild structure building, being absent during the launch, leaving a large portion of
You're
the
young,
player
what
base
you're talking
unserved
about?
and disappointed.
My
The
knees are
graphics in
popping when I get
particular
off my
would
chair.
really become one of its biggest hurdles. We mentioned this as a problem for the Lord of the Rings Online section, but for Age of Conan, it was much harsher. As promised, the graphics were absolutely stunning for its time, and the sheer
looks
scale
great.
of the world and how much you could see at any given time was truly impressive. However, it also severely gatekept the player base, as few had machines that were powerful enough to run it smoothly, leading to choppy frames and a very poor experience. As someone who played it personally during its launch, to get over 20 frames a second, I remember having to have the camera constantly facing the ground. This poor performance was especially bad because of this new interactive combat system. It demanded much more agency compared to the classic tab targeting, because you had to react to enemies putting their guard up and defenses, and putting yours
Yeah,
up
that
and trying to
sounds
string
extremely
combos
ambitious
together.
for such an
So
old game.
It was much trickier when you're
I
getting
appreciate it,
10
though.
frames a second. So for a very large portion of the player base, it turned what should have been this innovative experience into a rather frustrating one. As for the end game, it was quite disappointing early on. As mentioned, the structure building was absent at launch, and the PvP stages were delayed by uneven leveling between the game's races, and similar to the Lord of the Rings Online, while the endgame PvE was there, it simply didn't feel as polished as World of Warcraft's, which now even had a few years of experience under their belts. All of this led to rapid attrition. The population halved within the first month and dropped to around 200,000 by month 2. World of Warcraft's impending Wrath of the Lich King expansion, which ended up being a peak of the game, rapidly drew players back, as Blizzard's polished updates outshone Funcom's mismanagement, including post-launch layoffs and delayed fixes. It wasn't long after release that Age of Conan's co-founder would quit, citing dissatisfaction with the project, as subscriptions continued to tumble until 2011, where it too would convert to the dreaded free-to-play model, signaling defeat.
Yes.
In retrospect,
Retirement
Age
home.
of Conan's
And you know what? I can't even blame all of these games. Competing against World of Warcraft at its peak is impossible. I'm actually surprised they tried to take on the Juggernaut, and it just goes to show you, even to this day, nothing beats Classic. Not even retail WoW, by a huge margin too. And it just goes to show, like, Blizzard truly created the best game out there. And it wasn't, like, perfect. Obviously, there were many issues, but it was so goddamn good. And nobody managed to upstage them. Nobody.
innovative features and intense graphical capability ended up being
Yeah, at
undermined
least
by
they tried.
execution flaws, and unluckily World of Warcraft's continued success, proving that raw power alone can't top a cultural phenomenon, and serving as just one of many MMOs released during this area that hamstrung itself by releasing far too early. Today, it barely clings to life, despite the fact that there have been no official updates in over 5 years, serving as a depressing yet intriguing example of what was once a highly anticipated world, now forgotten and seemingly abandoned.
25-year Warhammer. People told me to check out a private server of Warhammer. Wait, I know a guy at my job. We're not even allowed to talk about WoW because when he was younger, was addicted and ruined his life. Yeah.
2008 truly did represent
Sounds about
the
right.
gold rush within the genre, as it was also then is when Warhammer Online.
Yeah, I will say every single Warhammer game is cursed. I don't know why. It has the best, like, interstellar story out there. Maybe that's not like 40k, but still, like, Warhammer and the entire, like, series, insanely good stories. For some reason, the game never really pop off. I don't know why. Like, I just don't know. It feels like it's cursed.
The Age of Reckoning would also see its
We did
release
have that one game
riding off the
recently,
wave
though. I
of
forgot the name
immense
of it.
hype as one of the most
It was good.
anticipated MMORPGs of its era. It was often touted as the legitimate WoW killer this time, for sure. Developed by Mythic Entertainment, creators of the PvP-focused Dark Age of Camelot, and published by Electronic Arts, it leveraged the rich and gritty Warhammer fantasy universe from Games Workshop, promising a world of perpetual conflict between the forces of order and destruction. The game's core innovation, and possibly its most advertised feature, was its Realm versus Realm system, featuring massive-scale PvP battles, objective-driven scenarios, and dynamic campaigns where players could invade enemy territories and sack capital cities, creating a sense of this real, gritty, ongoing war. A lot of excitement was generated with video blogs from the creative director, Paul Barnett, where he had developer diaries showcasing concept art, gameplay, and promotional events. As usual, online communities and media outlets buzzed with predictions of it dethroning World of Warcraft,
that's impressive.
citing not only its RVR focus,
Yeah, Guild
but
Wars
also
2
its
stole World
innovative
vs.
public
World.
quest system, which were open world
Impressive.
events where players collaborated without grouping, and also a class system blending archetypes.
Listen, I never was a huge MMO PvP Andy. I always thought, and I always think to this day, that MMOs are built off the backs of PvE Andes, and like nobody really cares because every single PvP based MMO died, right? So it's just like a fact. But I will say that looks impressive. But also, I'll mention, like, PvP should always exist alongside PvE, but PvE should always be the main focus. Always.
It's like the warrior priest for hybrid roles. As the Warhammer universe predated Warcraft, it was quite clear that the latter took a lot of inspiration from it, meaning that these two worlds were very similar to each other, which made direct comparisons inevitable. Initial sales reflected the fervor,
texts.
with 1.2 million copies sold by late September, with 800,000 registered users and 750,000 active players by October, primarily drawing in PvP enthusiasts eager for a fresh alternative to the world of Azeroth. But, as history would show, despite the strong start, Warhammer Online rapidly declined. Positive reviews highlighted exciting PvP, but the game's heavy emphasis on it alienated casual players who World of Warcraft had excelled in serving at this point, and offering a far superior leveling campaign, as well as a rich PvE endgame. Like Age of Conan, it too suffered issues at launch, with many believing that it was released
Yeah, you tried to
prematurely.
compete with
Too many
Old
initial
War.
servers led to fragmented populations as the initial surge started to wane, which caused deserted realms and subsequent merges that frustrated communities. Poor faction balance was an issue, and it hamstrung their most enticing feature, their RVR, as battles quickly became lopsided and unfun for both sides. They also suffered controversies
Classic.
outside of the game, such as players being erroneously billed for multiple years of subscription fees in a single day. Subscribers
What?
quickly plummeted to 300,000 by December of 2008, which prompted further server reductions from dozens to just 13, and later on just 3 worldwide. With the game waning, EA's influence began to become more powerful as they started to divert resources to other projects, which resulted in minimal post-launch support that failed to address core flaws as content updates slowed to a crawl. And all the while, World of Warcraft was going strong with what is considered today to be its highest quality expansion. As financial losses started to pile up for EA,
Yeah, they
Warhammer
should have waited
Online's
for the
fate would be
pandas.
sealed, with the Games Workshop license
Big mistake.
expiring in 2013, leading to its shutdown. It was a game that had plenty of innovative systems. In fact, many of them would later be essentially lifted by World of Warcraft itself, and its failure for many today is more of a reflection of a rushed launch with...
You know something funny? Remember when EA was like the bane of everyone's existence, and whenever you said EA together, everyone like, oh no, the greedy bastards, I hate them. I think that EA is, compared to what we have today, is the most modest, moderate company out there. It's actually crazy how old EA became like the minimal benchmark of a greed lord company. Isn't that insane? Like, we've come so far and we didn't even bother looking back. It's absolutely mind-boggling. Like, old EA won't hold a candle to an average corporate in today's standard. Literally nothing whatsoever. Yeah, everyone became worse than EA, but EA stayed the same. Exactly. They stayed the good guys. Imagine that.
destructive influence.
Have you not seen any of the sports game? It was always like that.
From its publisher,
Obviously.
as well as poor timing.
Call of Duty
as
isn't
it was
better.
pitted against World of Warcraft during the worst possible moment. Fan-run server, The Return of Reckoning, keeps its spirit alive today.
Yeah, the good
providing
guys,
a home
right?
for diehard fans. And
Big
if you're
quotes there.
interested in more detail of its rise and fall, this is one of the MMOs that I did actually cover fully in its own dedicated video, which I'll have linked in the description.
Sure. Okay, let's see the next one. Next one is Guild Wars, right? Should be,
You
according to the...
assumed
Oh, Star
no
Wars. Okay.
force could challenge you.
Bro, I never played that. I hate Star Wars.
And now,
I don't care. I said it. I said it. There we go.
finally, we have returned.
For our next
We?
entry, similar to the Lord of the Rings,
Who's we?
we take what is quite possibly the nerdiest genre of game and combine it with what is quite possibly the nerdiest IP in existence. Star Wars, The Old Republic. Coming off the back of the failed Star Wars Galaxies, The Old Republic was the IP's second attempt at breaking into the then bustling genre, bringing with it one of the largest development budgets in MMO history, estimated between $200 and $300 million,
Damn.
positioning it as the ultimate WoW killer.
Wow.
For
And even
sure.
if you count to inflation, it's way more than that. That's crazy. For the time, like $200 million. Bro, that's
For
insane.
this time, developed this time by BioWare, who are then renowned for their narrative masterpieces
BioWare?
like The Knights of the Old Republic and Mass Effect, and it was published by
Yeah, now known for Call of Duty slop.
The Old Republic promised to revolutionize the genre by making every player feel as if they were in the Star Wars universe with their own fully voiced cinematic story set 3,600 years before the films. The game's 8 class campaigns, each with branching dialogue, moral choices, and companion relationships, were fully voice acted by Hollywood talents such as Jennifer Hale and Steve Blum, delivering a single-player RPG experience.
Steve Blum is
within
everywhere.
This MMO shell.
He's
Features
Wolverine,
like
right? I
flashpoints,
know him. He's
which
a great
were
voice
instant
actor.
Group content, space combat, faction-based PvP war zones, added variety, while at the same time, the Old Republic era allowing creative freedom unbound by the film canon. Critics and fans praised the storytelling, with some calling it the best story-driven MMO ever made at that point, and it was all backed by John Williams-inspired orchestral scores. Forums overflowed with excitement, predicting that this time for sure, it would finally dethrone World of Warcraft.
Yes.
Especially since it was set
It's
to release
happening.
during a rather rare moment during World of Warcraft's legacy, where for the first time it had shown signs of weakness with the Cataclysm expansion. So
Still
unlike
wasn't out.
Warhammer or Age of Conan, it had the correct timing to strike. Marketing was absolutely huge and commanded a sizable percentage of its massive budget. CGI trailers that rivaled World of Warcraft racked up millions of views as pre-orders exceeded 1 million, and after the game launched, over 2 million players logged in during the first week, which shattered records for the fastest-selling MMO, excluding expansion packs. Yet, despite this explosive launch, the Old Republic failed to sustain this momentum, and it never seriously threatened World of Warcraft. The core issue was structural. One of their biggest sells, the fully narrated campaign, was front-loaded in the leveling, which left players empty-handed upon reaching the max level, as the game sort of awkwardly transitioned into a more traditional, repetitive MMO.
Also, listen, I've never played this game, so I can't really just, go 100% here, but I'll just say this. I think that fully narrated cutscenes that take you out of the game loop are really unhealthy for an MMORPG. I think that what captivated people in World of Warcraft, and I can only speak for my experience, is that you actually just soaked in the environment. The environmental storytelling was the king of the game, and that's what hooked people in. That's what captured them. Whenever you make like a lot of cinematics, and even though they're like fully voice acted, which is awesome, and they're really like budget heavy, you have all of the explosion, all of the fantastic stuff, it doesn't keep people for long. It's like wham bam, thank you ma'am, right? That's it. I think at the end of the day, if you want to make a successful MMORPG, the world needs to be the lead character, and you need to make sure that the world is telling you the story. But from what I'm seeing right now, that didn't happen for this MMO. I might be wrong about that.
With the standard daily quests and gear treadmills, which felt jarring and hollow without the narrative glue that made the leveling shine.
Yeah.
This problem was made worse with the fact that max level content in general was lacking in quality or missing entirely, as evidence of yet another rushed release started to show. And infamously, another structural problem was the engine that they used was a modified version of the hero engine, which ended up being unfit with an MMO setting.
Or like
as
the
it struggled
villain
in
engine.
all corners of the game.
Get it?
There's quite a noticeable delay between using an ability or spell and that spell actually connecting, an issue that they tried to mask with fluid animations, but still, it left the core combat of the game feel rather clunky and unresponsive, which just left players wanting to return to the finely tuned and polished experience that World of Warcraft offered. Many lamented that the world failed to capture the vastness that the Star Wars universe was capable of.
The map looks so
as
lifeless.
most of the areas in the game were instanced, which in comparison
UI
to
is
World
kinda
of
fine,
Warcraft lacked seamless, explorable continents without the interruption of a loading screen. For many, it just didn't really feel...
Yeah, and people don't even realize how big it was back in the day. I remember my friend telling me that he was like an insane WoW player, right? He constantly told me like, oh, World of Warcraft, bro, you can walk from this place to the other place without any loading screen whatsoever. Like, people truly don't understand how big that shit was back in the day. It was absolutely revolutionary. So Blizzard were truly pioneers, even in terms of like engineering and designing their game. It's insane. Absolutely insane.
Like a world, let alone a universe. So they unfortunately didn't achieve their goal of giving the players this feeling that they were actually living in the Star Wars universe, which, ironically enough, was something that its failed predecessor, Star Wars Galaxies, did quite well. It felt quite restrictive in a lot of ways. Even the highly anticipated space combat, where people imagined this wing commander-like experience of soaring around the planets in these intense classic Star Wars dogfights, left fans disappointed when they found out that it was entirely on rails. Instance Battlegrounds, in order to keep the queue times low, initially pitted maximum level characters against low levels and scaling the ladder stats up to accommodate
Just get 'em.
discrepancy. However, this did little to help, as low-level players still lacked their full toolkit.
Gameplay actually
Is
looks
comparable,
kind of fun.
For instance,
I'm not
in
gonna lie.
World of Warcraft having
It looks
this
very
level
interesting.
60 rogue
Was it good?
versus a scaled-up level 10 rogue. You can give them even health and damage, but if the level 10 only has Sinister Strike and Gouge, it's not really going to be a fair fight. So because of this, the victor 9 times out of 10 was simply the side that had more true max level characters. This was later rectified partially, as the maximum levels were wisely given their own queues, but it was a substantial amount of time after its critical launch period, so many got fed up and left before ever seeing it fixed. And outside of the battlegrounds, its heavily advertised open world zone, Ilum, was also mostly unplayable due to its large scope, which caused performance issues, as well as design flaws, as it was initially more beneficial to win trade rather than actually participating. By mid-2012,
Oh,
millions
classic.
of voices
Wait, you
cried
do it
out
in WoW
terror
nowadays too?
and were suddenly silenced
But
when
you have to pay for it.
subscriptions plummeted from 1.7 million to under 500,000, eventually forcing the dreaded free-to-play shift with restrictive caps and predatory cash shops that alienated players. BioWare's
No.
inexperience with live service MMOs showed. The updates were slow, bug fixes were delayed, and promised features like the ranked war zones arrived late. The game was and continues to be great
that the
at
Chewbacca?
drawing in players who enjoy their more single-player experiences.
I don't really
such
know
as
any of the
the
characters.
legendary Knights of the Old Republic. But once that ended and transitioned into a normal MMO, its flaws started to become very clear, proving that even the Star Wars IP and BioWare's storytelling magic couldn't overcome the genre's demand for this endless, evolving, and well-designed systems and content. Today, its identity remains to be this story-driven title, and it certainly serves those players well, and they overall
damn
seem to
it.
be
Wait,
pretty
yeah.
happy with
Whoa,
it.
it looks actually
but
really
its
good.
2011 promise as
I'm
World
assuming
of
that's a
Warcraft's
trailer?
destroyer remains to be one of the industry's most expensive, unfulfilled prophecies. Moreover, although the term WoW killer was and is still used many years later, it was after the Old Republic that people began to really lose trust in that term, as the grave that was meant to be filled with Blizzard's giant was now overfilling with those who sought to succeed it.
Yeah, cinematics are WoW level of goated in my opinion. They looked really great.
While this term was largely used by the individual players of the genre,
What
the
is
next
that?
entry on the list actually made ads about it, and that's Rift in 2011,
Oh,
which was
Rift!
themed around
Oh
this
my
dynamic
God.
world where planar rifts tore open
Jesus.
spontaneously, spawning invasions that demanded server-wide cooperation to repel. Developed by Treon Worlds and powered by a custom engine, the game promised to evolve the theme
Nah,
park
that's an
formula
oldie.
with reactive events. These rifts would escalate into zone-wide wars if ignored, and they would trigger boss spawns and drop powerful loot, as well as serving as a way to level up to break the monotony of the
I never
standard
played it, but I
MMO
heard a lot
questing.
about it. People
The
love
marketing
this
was
game.
pretty direct, using the tagline, "You're not an Azeroth anymore." And it was fairly effective.
Oh my
with
god, wait, are
pre-orders
they allowed to
topping
do based? Holy, that's based. What? You can even do that? Dog, I would have tried out the game based on that alone.
500,000 and over 1 million accounts activated within the first month. Not quite as intense.
Their
as
mistake was
previous
trash
entries,
talking WoW.
but still quite
I
notable.
can see why.
Beta weekend saw queues of
They should have
10,000
waited
plus
until
as
retail became
players
what it is
marveled
today.
at their crown jewel,
When it
which
became
was
popular.
their class system consisting of 4 callings: the warrior, cleric, mage, and rogue,
Only
with
4?
8 souls each, which
Oh.
were sort of like subclasses. You could mix
Okay.
and match 3 of
Damn, wait, that's like, whoa. Okay, that actually took me by surprise. That looks good. So you had so many specs. You had like 4 classes, like base classes and offshoots, which completely changed the gameplay, I assume. It actually looks really good. I really like that.
them, which allowed for hybrids, such as the fan favorite Chloromancer healer, who damaged enemies to restore allies.
That's innovative.
You could unlock more of these souls by questing, which gave players a lot of room to experiment.
Whoa.
And it was really targeting World of Warcraft refugees who didn't really care for its rather rigid class system.
Yeah.
Exploration would also
Unfortunately, it came during Pandaria, right? If I'm following the timeline correctly, it came during Mist of Pandaria, maybe, or Cataclysm. In Mist of Pandaria, classes were at their peak almost. Like, classes were really good at Mist of Pandaria. I've watched a lot of videos from that time period, and like I know classes were really insane. In Legion, I played Legion. Classes were good, and definitely not peak. But classes were good in Pandaria, so I think they kind of just screwed himself over.
be a key selling point. Hidden items called artifacts were spread throughout the world, which could be traded for vanity items, encouraging players to go off of the beaten path.
Yeah, I think it
and
was before,
explore
maybe
every
Cataclysm,
corner
yeah.
of the rich world that they were advertising. As for the actual launch and introduction experience, it was uncharacteristically smooth for an MMO. The players jumped in, conquered rifts, built their own unique classes, and explored the nooks and crannies of the world. And they
Damn,
did the
what
standard
happened to
gameplay
this
of
game?
what was expected of an MMO, giving players a very familiar experience. That sounds all well and good, but unfortunately, this is what would prevent it from overtaking World of Warcraft. Rift suffered the same fate of some of the others in this list. It wasn't really bad by any means. It was just another MMO that didn't really have enough innovation to overtake the genre, as it left players with an extremely familiar, yet unremarkable experience. The dynamic Rift events, which the game was named after, couldn't escape the fate that all MMOs face. If you do something enough times, i.e. hundreds, it will eventually become repetitive. They ended up being less innovative than players had hoped, with some even labeling them as a rehash of Warhammer Online's public quest system. They spawned on timers.
I mean, you can throw that claim on literally every single MMORPG that utilizes that system. I don't think that's true. I think it's just like something people use to clown on this game, maybe. I mean, you can say the exact same thing about Guild Wars 2 meta events. Like, oh, they're so repetitive. I've done them a million times. All I do is kill something, grab something. Yeah, that's what MMORPGs are about. I don't think that was the case. I don't really like that argument.
Followed scripts, and the loot tables
Like, everything
incentivized
become
farming.
repetitive. Yeah, like, literally, you're so right about this, Vic. Like, literally, people to this day farm Mythic Plus like mindless zombies. Of course, like, who cares, right? MMORPGs are all about repetitiveness. It just depends if you like it or not.
The same footholds repeatedly, which undermined this ever-changing alive world that they were banking on. Again, it's not to say that they were bad, just not as game-changing as players had hoped that they would be. Probably its best feature was its class system. As players adventured throughout the world and they unlocked
The class
more and more
system
souls,
sounds incredible.
As promised, it gave them a lot of agency and power to create their own unique builds. It did end up suffering that age-old problem that every MMO faces. Choice can oftentimes be an illusion, as there's always a best. There's always some sort of meta that gets established, so while it may have had the capability to have all of these different combinations, oftentimes, especially with social media.
Again, but Wrath of the Lich King suffered the exact same problem as well, and nobody cared. So it's not a real argument. It's not.
It was at this point.
Right, obviously Fury Warriors were cracked during Wrath because of Titan's Grip, and Paladins were nut jobs because all of the tools they got. So it's like, it's not true. It's really not true.
Most people just fell into a few different builds, but
it's
that
always the
doesn't take away
same
from the fact that it was a very unique system that served nearly every single playstyle that the genre had to offer, and it was rare for people to not vibe with at least something. Unfortunately for them, though, it simply ended up not being enough, and despite its rare, smooth launch, it was just too familiar and derivative for players. Server populations fragmented across 30-plus realms, which led to its own host of issues such as mergers, which further fractured what remained of communities, as subscribers waned from reportedly 1 million active in 2011 to under 100,000 by 2014. Like many others, today it does still linger on. It was sold to another company called GammaGo, where it has subsequently stagnated. Now a free-to-play relic,
Obviously.
remembered mainly for briefly making the online world standard to the MMO feel alive
It looks
again.
so good.
That is, before the rifts were closed and Azeroth called players back home, contrary to its advertising tagline.
I actually feel bad about this one. This looks like an MMORPG I would have 100% played.
Now
Oh,
is the
there
time.
it is! Guild Wars 2, it's coming, boys!
Forge your legend.
Yes.
Next entry on our list is quite unique because it isn't dead or reduced to this very niche audience. It's in fact found a pretty respectable player base, and it's carved out its own foothold within the genre, and that's Guild Wars 2, released in August of 2012. Developed by the veterans ArenaNet, Guild Wars 2 promised a living, breathing world that would put their first installment to shame. It aimed to stray away from the vertical style of progression that World of Warcraft had standardized, where resets were infrequent and investment mattered many years after it was made. The combat would be its first innovation, blending a combination of tab targeting and action-style elements that rewarded those who stayed mobile.
It looks so different back in the day,
while
too.
At the same time, fluidly weaving in their attack rotation. The class system was unique. Boldly, they had aimed to break the Holy Trinity tank
Revenants?
DPS combo that was now standard in the genre, offering classes with high customizability and loadouts, as players could mix and match abilities. And
wow, dude, the game looks so different back in the day. That's crazy. You had so less bloat. Like, it's so, wow. And you never had elite specs back in the day too, right? And you didn't know of their existence. You didn't know that the first expansion, Heart of Thorns, is going to give you an elite. No, you just play the game with two basic game loops, game style, sorry. Man, that's like base Giga Chad. Absolutely crazy. I love that.
Create their own hybrid builds. And reminiscent in some ways of Warhammer Online, their world versus world system was also a big draw, pairing your server against two others in a giant, large-scale battle for territory control. Groups and guilds would band together to capture keeps and castles in these massive sieges, or find small skirmishes in the fields between them. Both this game mode and its normal PvP would also scale players' levels up to be even with one another, which made it very accessible and easy to get into, and make you feel like you're always contributing, as well as keeping the battles relatively even. Another main feature, and players from Rift and Warhammer Online would recognize this, was the event system, where, similar to those games, what are called events would pop up in the world for players to complete. Although it wasn't the most innovative feature at the time, it did add some dynamic replayability and also spiced up the often grindy nature of the leveling in MMOs, as well as adding a bit of social play at the same time.
I think.
So this, combined with the massive cooperative PvP mode, it aimed to make the game feel very cooperative and reward team play. Leveling was also unique in the sense that every action provided experience. Instead of questing, you could mine, create items, or complete achievements and challenges, which gave the player a lot of power to divert from the standard run-of-the-mill questing experience.
Oh,
It
it's
was
a
quite
world
attractive
boss?
for those who
I never fought
preferred
against
the
him.
less combat-oriented elements of the genre. And all of this without a subscription fee. While there is a big stigma against free-to-play games in the genre, it wasn't completely free as it launched.
I think if Guild Wars 2 went subscription-based, the game would have died on the spot. I think the smartest thing they could have done is actually make it like one-time pay and that's it. Absolutely.
With
Absolutely.
the payment model of purchasing the base game and also expansions, but foregoing the monthly payment in order to appeal to a broader audience that didn't want to commit so much to it. And so the game launched, and this is normally where I describe where things went horribly wrong, but it really didn't. It wasn't perfect by any means. It suffered some launch issues as any other MMO would, but things weren't so bad as to scare away the bulk of their player base like some other games in this video. It had a solid endgame, both PvE and PvP. The classes didn't feel restrictive and gave players a lot of freedom for experimentation. The combat was smooth and fun. It has arguably the best flight system in the entire genre, with World of Warcraft essentially lifting it in their Dragonflight expansion.
And making it worse.
To top it all off, its focus on horizontal progression ensures that the time that players invest into the game retains a good amount of its value compared to many other games within the genre. Like everything else in this list, it failed to kill World of Warcraft, but I never really tried to.
Yeah,
The sheer
I was about to say
excitement
that.
surrounding it positioned it as the genre's future, but it was never marketed as a WoW killer. So
And that's why it survived. That's why this game survived, because it didn't try to be a WoW killer. Each time you try to become a WoW killer, you get killed. And whenever Guild Wars 2 came with something innovative, they thought, hey, we're gonna brand it as our own thing, we're not gonna compete with anyone. If you like WoW, cool, but if you want to try out our game, awesome. I had to take that bathroom break. Guys, I literally checked throughout the entire video how long we have until the end, and when we reached Guild Wars 2, I couldn't take this any longer.
such as with Rift. In fact, ArenaNet themselves even said that they didn't want to complete directly with World of Warcraft, as they were trying to make something different, which they succeeded at, as today, the game for many is a good representative of what a quality horizontal progression MMO should be, and it continues to get expansions and updates, and continues to be a worthy and reliable source of fun for its players.
Guild Wars 2 remain. Oh, Elder Scrolls Online, right? Yes.
There exist many IPs of varying genres that players feel would make great choices for a reimagining in the MMO setting.
And that's the problem. Players don't know what the hell they're talking about most of the time.
At a certain point, one of the most popular was the world of Elder Scrolls by Bethesda, instead of being caught in the shackles of a single-player campaign-driven experience.
You can, literally people need to start realizing that you can turn any successful series into an MMORPG and it would suddenly be successful. Like, I really don't understand the logic behind it. Some games work as one genre but would never work as the other. It's so stupid. It's like trying to make, I don't know, like Skyrim is an extraction shooter game, right? Obviously, like not shooter, like something like that. It wouldn't really work. Even if you try to make it as a survival game, which is more closer to its roots, and a lot of people are on the survival game arc right now, it won't necessarily work. So I really don't get why people are so insistent on trying to force these things into fruition. Just let a game be a game. Let a game be unique. You don't need to expand to every other genre on planet Earth. Like, it's fine to be one thing and just be good at it.
The world of Tamriel was shared by players, with the classic quests featured in the leveling campaign, and the endgame to be this classic, large-scale, group-oriented content. ZeniMax Online Studios would promise just that.
It looks horrible.
With the unveiling of the Elder Scrolls Online.
It looks like a
At this
mod
point,
for
Skyrim
the
had
game.
released just 3 years earlier, and it sold over 30 million copies, quickly reinforcing that it was a staple of the open-world fantasy RPG genre. But now, Bethesda had handed the keys to its most sacred franchise to a studio led by Matt Fuhrer, who is the architect of the Dark Age of Camelot. The vision, as was standard with the genre, was ambitious, to say the least. Players would explore every province from High Rock to Black Marsh, and wage war in 3-faction PvP, steal from
But who cares? You have the most uninspiring races in the world. You have the most dull looking world too. And the game just looked like a Skyrim mod. So what are we doing here? There's nothing unique about this. It looked like rehashed garbage. No wonder it flopped. Literally no wonder
Merchants,
whatsoever.
Murder innocents, join the Dark Brotherhood or the Mages Guild.
Like,
Pretty much
who cares?
everything that made the Elder Scrolls this legendary sandbox, but now amplified by the presence of other players. Cinematic trailers amassed millions of views. Pre-orders began to fly off of the shelves. And as usual, fans anointed ESO as the new heir before it even launched. By launch day itself, which was April 4th, 2014, they had 1.3 billion pre-orders secured. At that point, quite a serious challenge to Blizzard's upcoming Warlords of
this is
Draenor
where I
expansion,
started playing World
because
of Warcraft.
importantly, it would come at a time of great stagnation, as the end of the Mists of Pandaria had one of the longest content droughts in the game's history. People were bored. The identity and theme of Mists was a big miss for many of its players, and the Elder Scrolls Online looked more like World of Warcraft than World of Warcraft did itself at this point, while subscriptions were tumbling, and the stage couldn't be set more perfectly for a new king of the MMO.
The downfall of World of Warcraft.
Since it's in this...
Wait, you started in Warlords of Draenor? I know. It's crazy, right? Poser, what do you mean? I always said that I started in Draenor. You know why I started in Draenor? Because that's when I became 18 and I had my credit card. That's why. I could afford to pay for World of Warcraft. My parents refused to buy me anything that relates to video game whatsoever. Not even a console. I never had console. I always had like trash PCs. But my parents refused to buy me anything. Except for like PS3 when PS4 came out and it was like reused garbage. I bought second-hand one. That's it. Literally that. And that's the reason. I also started in Warlords of Draenor. Damn. My condolences.
Video, something obviously went wrong. And while it wouldn't be fair to say that it's a bad game, it just wasn't all as great as people imagined it would be. The most overpowering feedback that people will tell you is that while they wanted Elder Scrolls and they wanted an MMO, instead of these two forces complementing each other in this smooth and enjoyable experience, they actually ended up getting in each other's way, and it just turned out to be a poor Elder Scrolls experience and a rather mediocre MMO, where quests felt important and had weight in the single-player games, as is standard with most MMOs due to the sheer amount required to reach the max level. In ESO, they felt diluted, mundane, and unimportant, and lacking the level of polish and depth and narrative that the series had become iconic for.
Just have older siblings? Brother, all I have is older siblings. I'm the youngest. And by the way, you know, it's funny you say that. Warlords of Draenor, I actually gave money to my sister because my credit card didn't arrive and she bought the game for me. The first subscription she bought for me, I bought the rest. I remember that clearly.
And importantly, due to its sandbox nature and its associated freedom, you really often created your own story and chose your own direction. However, since ESO is an MMO, a rather linear one at that, everyone is given this predetermined direction, and therefore it lacks one of the series' greatest strengths. The series defines itself on the lone hero overcoming these impossible situations, swaying kings, slaying others, slaying dragons, and making the player feel like they're this major, impactful figure within the world, and that just isn't possible in a multiplayer setting. Another large issue for many was its core, the combat. The combat in Skyrim, while not perfect, was smooth, punchy, responsive, and fun. Swinging a sword or warhammer felt like it had weight, and flinging spells felt satisfying and immersive. That is, if you don't count pausing the game in order to ingest 40 cheese wheels.
This is a tasty burger.
And in ESO, while not as polished, it does have some of the same flashes as it's all in real time. Wisely, they did avoid the tab targeting system, and they stuck with the more appropriate real-time kind of hybrid. But when people criticize the combat in ESO, oftentimes they just say that it felt
It
flat
looks
and boring.
horrible.
And the reason for that isn't really due to the actual combat, but more by the fact that in 95% of the game's content, and for the entirety of the questing campaign, it just lacked any agency because everything was too easy. It had the Lost Ark syndrome. Another game, speaking strictly the leveling campaign here, was laughably boring because 95% of the encounters ended within 5 seconds of starting them. it was so easy that
I played
it
ESO
didn't
for 9
keep
years, I
players
can tell you the
engaged.
combat
If
sucks.
we're speaking strictly
Base.
MMOs here, it's rather common for most of the challenge to be held at the end game, whereas questing serves as an introduction to prepare you for that end game. If every single enemy were challenging, it would be quite laborious to kill thousands upon thousands of them during your leveling campaign, but again, the whole idea of ESO was to draw in fans of Elder Scrolls, a community of people who were used to and expected a smooth, engaging, polished, and at least somewhat challenging combat experience. And while it certainly had potential, it just didn't really live up to it, and it made other systems feel worse, such as their class system, which banked on high customization and experimenting, which is great by itself. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter that much because you could essentially roll your face on the keyboard and achieve the same outcome. Again, discounting the end game,
the combat
where there
looks
is some challenge
extremely
to be
delayed.
found,
I understand what you're
experimenting was
saying.
meaningless because any combination
It looks
resulted in
super
success,
floaty and
no matter how
janky.
ridiculous it may have been. Level scaling was an issue.
like you're shadow
when the
boxing
game first
constantly.
came out, it followed the World of Warcraft style of enemies in a zone having a certain level. So if you're level 10 and you try to go to a level 20 zone, you would get destroyed pretty quickly, which again was against the identity of what made Elder Scrolls great. One of its main draws is that it's this huge open world with many different things to do and different directions to go, and you're given a lot of power in the order.
Oh, listen, people gonna hate me if they love Skyrim. I felt the open world was so empty. It was just so dull and boring, and you had nothing to do. I guess that was like kind of the point, but I just didn't like this game whatsoever. I downloaded, after playing the base game for like a day or two, I had to download so many mods that actually makes the game good to have fun. I think most of the fun comes from like the mods rather than you actually playing the vanilla game. Yeah, vanilla, it's lame. I know, right? It's insane.
In which to do them. And so the developers took on this feedback and they changed it such that the enemies now scaled with the player's level, which gave more freedom. However, on the other hand, it made it feel less like an RPG. This was something that World of Warcraft struggled with in the Legion expansion when they did essentially the same thing. One of the core pillars of the RPG genre is feeling like you're progressing, encountering an enemy or a boss, struggling, gaining a few levels, and then coming back and making it your bitch. This is the satisfying
True.
core pillar of nearly
That's
every
why level
RPG
scaling
ever
sucks
made.
in retail
But
WoW.
if everything now scales
And Guild
with
Wars
you,
too.
it's completely lost, and numbers
Absolutely.
become just that,
Yes.
numbers.
Thank you. Oh my god, thank you. Anyone who protects level scaling inside of an MMORPG should be banned from ever playing one. This is undefendable. I can't stretch this enough. Level scaling literally defeats the purpose of an MMORPG and power fantasy. You should never have level scaling inside of an MMORPG. Or level boost for that matter too.
You do more numbers, but
So
the enemy has
idiotic.
higher numbers, therefore you've not progressed, which put into question the point of levels to begin with, as they've now become this arbitrary carrot to chase. Another disappointing thing was that thief characters shipped without any meaningful thievery system. Sneaking around and pickpocketing is core to the franchise and extremely impactful in the single-player games, with players able to get 5-finger discounts on immediately used.
What? Level scaling makes content evergreen. I love it and I'm not ashamed. Making evergreen content means that everything is meaningless. When you have no scarcity, you have no enjoyment. That's how it works. That's like how the human brain function. That's why vertical MMORPGs are so successful, while horizontal will always be on the fringes. It is what it is, right? It's the carrot on a stick, but people love it. That's just how the cookie crumbles, man.
Useful or valuable.
But you're allowed to
in-game
think
items,
otherwise.
weapons,
It's
and
okay.
armor. However, in an MMO
We support
setting,
different opinions
they had
on
to be
my stream.
restricted because
Even
it
wrong
would be
ones.
way too powerful to loot items that actually had major value or impact, as it would break the core gameplay and economy. No one would run dungeons or raids or grind crafting if you could simply steal something equivalent from a weapon shop in the city, so they were limited to food, low-level items, or other inconsequential, mostly useless junk, along with a daily limit of the amount of stolen items that you could sell, again, all because of the restrictions of its multiplayer setting. In trying to serve both fans of the Elder Scrolls series and fans of
You
the
failed to
MMORPG
actually
genre,
maintain
they ended
none,
up failing
yeah.
both, at least in its initial period. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. Similar to Rift, it was just okay, and okay wasn't enough to keep players hooked in any major way in what was then a very oversaturated genre. All of this, combined with controversies such as locking access to the most popular race, the Imperials, to a more expensive special edition, severely hindered that critical launch period, which is a shame because the game today, most agree, has improved drastically since its launch. It still releases expansions, and it has a respectable audience, and who knows what the future may hold, but these limitations were certainly enough to keep it from impacting.
I'm glad
World of
it's still
Warcraft
alive
in
and
a
people are
major
enjoying
way,
it.
even during what
It
many
always sucks
consider
to see
be
an
one of its
MMORPG
most
dies.
vulnerable periods.
It's definitely not my cup of tea. What? Carbine Studios. Oh, Wildstar. Okay. Oh, shit. Wait. Whoa, whoa, whoa. What was that? Furry
At this
game?
point, it had started
Barbecue
to set in with
here?
people that World of Warcraft was
There
here
we
to
go.
stay. But wait
Oh,
a second.
Craig has...
What about an MMO that was developed by none other than Blizzard?
Yeah.
Wildstar is the next entry on our list. A game whose development team consisted of former World of Warcraft developers under the name Carbine Studios. A big pitch for the game was that although several developers were from Blizzard, it wanted to form its own identity based around the fact that it wasn't World of Warcraft, and it
was
didn't wanna
crazy
fall
how
into the
good the
same
combat was.
fatiguing clone market that had been
Combat felt
oversaturating
so
the genre
good.
for years at this point. They would try to achieve this in many ways, even going as far as to creating its own engine to cater to their needs. Set on the planet Nexus, it pitched a very colorful aesthetic with a brutal endgame, which was based around their telegraphed combat system. Like some of the others in this list, they decided to forgo the tab targeting system and went for more of this real-time reactionary-based combat, where projectiles and swings must be physically dodged or aimed in order to land, which provided much more agency and
It was
generally
fun. It was
required
innovative.
far more coordination. Of course, with
I played this game for not like a lot of time, but I did play it for a significant time, and I can tell you that what killed it was the dull world. Nobody liked the alien furry aesthetic. It was very, very cringe. World of Warcraft thrived based on Warcraft 3 grittiness and dark fantasy. Wildstar had none of that. I think eventually, inevitably, that's what killed the game. In my opinion, at least. And also 40-man raids and all of the problem that Sweat World of Warcraft developers implemented into this game. They should have never instilled those values inside of an MMORPG. They should have learned to be better, but they went super hardcore. The game was extremely difficult.
such a system, the
For no
movement
reason
had to be
whatsoever.
quite fluid, and players would be given a variety of tools to make both the combat and exploration feel fun and fair, such as dodge rolls and double jumps. There was a particularly large focus on difficulty and grinding, with raids that required
there it is.
pixel-perfect
He sang it.
coordination
I told you.
and attunement trials that were locked behind lengthy grinding, trying to appeal to a very hardcore audience. As grindy as it was, they aimed to mix things up by using
dude, I love that mechanic. I really wish they would add that to World of Warcraft. It was so cool. I was an explorer. I remember that. Basically, each one of these you choose is like a profession of sort, where you get to do things that interact with the world in a meaningful way. Explorers could explore different parts of the map, and you had to explore 100% of each map to get something. That was so innovative, man. I love that shit.
system called Paths, where upon character creation, players could choose any of the 4 choices of Explorer, Soldier, Settler, and Scientist, and these would give different experiences during the leveling, based around whatever they picked. PvP was a big focus, particularly their war plot system, which were very large-scale 40 versus 40 sieges that took place on battlefields crafted by the players themselves, aiming to ensure
I think
that
the abilities
each was a
themselves
unique
were also
experience.
problematic.
And player
You lacked
housing
abilities.
was an exciting feature for many, where players could buy these different plots of land and customize their own home to the finest detail, whether that be the house itself, its decor, or even the yard outside, as well as including actual gameplay features such as crafting, gathering, and even dungeons to run. And particularly because the development team consisted of former vanilla World of Warcraft developers, many had aspirations that they would be able to bottle lightning twice and finally be the one to dethrone their own creation.
Actual
but
fun
its
mechanics.
identity was far different, to say the least. World of Warcraft at this point had firmly entrenched in what was initially marketed as the MMO for the casual player, introducing many layers of accessibility at every corner. And while this served its casual audience, a portion of their hardcore players argued that it was done at the expense of the game's overall quality. And so Wildstar targeted these jaded veterans, promising salvation. There'd be no LFR mode, no welfare epics, no handouts, just skill, commitment, and
imagine
accomplishment. But anyone who knows the fate of Wildstar knows that this, of course, wouldn't last. MMO launches are filled with all types of players, casuals included, and having to find themselves as the
You should never cater to the 1%ers, neither the bottom or the top. Always aim for like the 70 to 80% of players in the middle. That's how you achieve a successful game.
Antithesis of casual. This audience would quickly fade in the face of this insurmountable challenge and grind. So much so that many today even pin the blame on them, focusing primarily on this hardcore audience. The questing, as described, was incredibly grindy and arduous, and even then, when the max level was reached and players started getting into raiding, they were hit with this brick wall. The attunement process requiring high performance in dungeons, world bosses, reputation grinds, locked 95% of the players out of the raids. And by September 14th, only 2% had stepped into the first raid.
Oh
and
my
where it promised
God.
difficulty,
I
boy,
didn't
did
even
it
know that
deliver.
was that bad.
The very few who actually made it to the raids were met with some of the most challenging content the genre had ever seen. Everything functioned as it was intended. The fights were quite creative, and the custom engine really shined by implementing this fluid movement in order to handle the mechanics.
Yeah, they became
But
retail
they were
WoW
also
before retail
brutally
WoW.
punishing,
That's
and
crazy.
Exhaustion would set in quick, with bosses even being buffed as time went on. This was speculated by some to add longevity to the game, in that the endgame content wasn't fully finished, as the content drought hit pretty hard. The launch also suffered from some general hiccups that was standard in the MMO. There were plots lagging into unplayability, as well as their auction house crashing daily. Speaking of war plots, they suffered from some queue issues, as it was difficult to get 80 players to join at the same time, and the PvP in these battles was pretty troublesome and degraded into chaotic clusterfucks. The problem with this telegraph system is that when PvP skirmishes got to a certain size, your screen would just become garbled with a mess of flashing red and players scrambling like chickens with their heads cut off, resulting in little strategy and a lot of rolling your face on the keyboard, spamming as many AoEs as humanly possible. I want you to tell me, what in the holy mother of God is going on here? Oh yeah, just dodge the red, bro. Come on, just dodge it. And so server populations hemorrhaged from 20 plus realms at launch to 2 by 2015. Oof. They attempted a relaunch in September of the same year,
it's a free-to-play.
but it didn't see much success, unfortunately. Carbine would lay off 70% of its staff in 2016, and NCSoft officially shuttered the studio in 2019, and Wildstar is chronicled as yet another MMO that failed to stay alive, let alone topple World of Warcraft. And many today cite Wildstar specifically in arguments between serving hardcore and casual audiences, with many concluding that at the very least, an MMO can survive on the hardcore audience alone. And while challenging endgame content is certainly important to the genre, it can't be the...
There's a reason why every PvP-based MMO died, because the PvP community are just a loud minority you should never listen to in your entire life. Like, who cares? That nobody plays PvP in MMORPGs. Everyone is, like, are exclusively PvE Andes that maybe play PvP on the side.
Sole focus and every area.
Yeah, and
of
they're
the
like,
game.
there are few key differences in like Albion and EVE Online, but it's only because the games are structured for these people. It really, really depends. Like, you can combine both of them.
Must have some level of polish to retain every type of player.
Yes. Now what? Oh, Final Fantasy. Let's go. FF14, boys, it's time for the redemption arc.
Last on our list, we have what is arguably the king of the RPG genre, Final Fantasy, coming off its successful launch of Final Fantasy XI in 2002. In 2009, Players would learn that the 14th installment would also be developed on the massively multiplayer scale. It promised another reinvention. Perhaps the biggest innovation was the class system, where players could switch between jobs on a single character, with the jobs themselves reminiscent of fan favorites of the series, such as the Black Mage, the Summoner, Paladin, which was quite unique compared to World of Warcraft's traditional system of locking players
that's the
to one
original
class
game.
on character creation. Developers promised a very heavy focus on lore and story, and retaining the charm of the single-player experiences. They said that they wanted this living story that was updated every 3 months, with adventures' actions shaping the fate of the world, as well as their fellow players.
How
the combat
cozy.
blended 11's deliberate pacing with real-time ability queuing, and the world was a love letter to the series, with primals like Ifrit and Titan manifested as these giant colossi. It would have player housing via housing wards, player orchestras, as well as the Golden Saucer to serve as side activities, promising a bright and active future, and fans were quite optimistic from the success of 11, declaring that 2010 to be the year that the East would finally topple Blizzard. Everything was looking pretty good, and
until it
then
wasn't.
the game launched.
Oh my god. It was so horrible. What is that? I can't believe they actually made the game this way. It's crazy how Yoshi P managed to save this game
And
from
the dream
literal
shattered
extinction.
as it ended up sucking what was perhaps the biggest dick in MMORPG history. The original Final Fantasy XIV, now retroactively dubbed version 1.0, was a catastrophe of historic proportion. The first thing that players would notice was its incredibly poorly designed interface, which was an indecipherable labyrinth of menus nested within menus, almost
The raids and
representing a
dungeons
series
were
of
fun,
puzzles
though?
to solve to even obtain the most basic information on how to play. Every menu had a submenu, every submenu
Classic.
had a submenu, and getting critical information such as item durability, stats, or even things like buying and selling items was unnecessarily irritating. Even one of their most touted features, which was changing jobs, was incredibly awkward and time-consuming.
That's
as your
revolting.
character would repeat.
It looked like one of those fake games people play on TV, like movies, right? Like they just play that. Like, oh man, it's disgusting. What is that? It doesn't even look real.
They phase in and out of existence as it equipped different pieces of gear.
AI-generated
The game initially had
MMORPG.
no auction house, instead using the player market feature, where players could set up vendors, but it had no interface to search items, so instead you'd have to investigate each vendor one by one, all the while trudging through menus and submenus, and then another submenu, only to find out that the only thing being sold are copper ore and pickles for a ridiculous price. Getting into the bread and butter of the game, the questing was quite monotonous. The world was copy-pasted terrain stretched for miles with little to no points of interest, and quests that required players to travel 20 minutes across empty plains to kill
Imagine
3
playing as the
ladybugs.
Lalafell.
There were no mounts nor fast travel systems initially present, aside from this teleportation system that lets you teleport to previously visited areas. However, this would cost a currency called anima, which was quite scarce, and
Anime?
most people would burn through it rather quickly. And while this does have some benefits, such as making the world seem large and imposing, since the zones were largely empty and dull, it wasn't really as rewarding as they had intended. They did follow through with some promises. There was story to be had with quite impressive in-game cutscenes, but they were delivered in milestones with long stretches of generic, tedious MMO questing injected in between them. And what's worse was that you couldn't even go at your own pace, as the game limited the amount of quests that you could complete, putting you on something of a daily timer before you could actually continue the story. The idea was that in the meantime, to force you to either grind mobs or more efficiently help other players with their quests.
Who made that game?
you've already
Holy.
completed, therefore encouraging social interaction.
They had
Although
no
some would
idea
say
what they
that
were
the word
doing.
Encouraging is rather generous,
It's
and
like
it really was
It's like they intentionally made every wrong decision creating an MMORPG.
just awkwardly restricting the player. And speaking of restrictions, even experience per job would eventually become capped, again to encourage people to switch between them and diversify their character. So between this and the severely limited methods of travel and the questing limitation, it really kind of betrayed one of its biggest marketed features, which was this freedom to do what you want to do. The graphics were fairly good. They were also quite demanding. Similar to some other games on this list, they had the problem of having this high barrier of entry in order for it to be playable smoothly, and even then it was poorly optimized, with even those having the most powerful machines suffering crashes and frame stuttering, which made things like combat even more clunky than it already was. Yeah, the interface wasn't the only awkward thing about the game. It just felt awkward, slow, and sluggish. It was difficult to target mobs. Spells and abilities would randomly lag or fail to function, and enemies' health would randomly regenerate to full for no reason. It was clear that this core part of every MMORPG had received little to no polish. In other words, it was a mess.
It's trash.
It was so bad that Square Enix actually issued a formal apology for how terrible it was, which was unprecedented.
Oh my god, imagine your game sucking so much balls you have to publicly apologize for it. God damn, that's next level.
History, and they vowed to essentially remake the game from the ground up.
Yeah,
which they eventually did
they
in
nuke everything.
2014, titling it a
Blizzard would never know. Blizzard would just gaslight you into thinking it was semi-acceptable.
Reborn. The interface was fixed.
Everything was
combat
changed.
Was ditched entirely. Travel options were improved. Story quests were refined, as well as the
game
class
was playable,
system, and it actually became a great MMORPG, with many citing it as one of the greatest redemption arcs within gaming history. It's a rather linear theme park style of MMO, but with a ton of side content to explore, and the game really shines in its story for most players. It hit something of a peak around the year 2020 with its Shadowbringers expansion and then into Endwalker, at which point the World of Warcraft had released what is regarded today as their worst expansion ever, the Shadowlands. Both within that expansion itself and the culture surrounding Blizzard as a whole contributed to something that the genre was very unfamiliar with. World of Warcraft was no longer the clear winner. Although it is impossible to tell, as neither MMO releases official subscription numbers, but some third-party analytics and data suggested that it was at least close, as players had begun to quit Shadowlands en masse and sort of migrated to Final Fantasy XIV. And to this day, that's the closest that any MMO has ever been to being labeled as a WoW killer.
True. Actually true. He's talking about the mass exodus of WoW player because of Asmongold. Asmongold has started this entire massive wave that I was part of, by the way. I completely jumped from Asmongold streams to FF14, and I had the best 6 months of my life because of it. I love that game so much. It still holds such a great place in my heart. Yeah, it wasn't close, by the way. Of course, nothing is close to World of Warcraft. WoW at its peak is every other game. It's like, no, WoW is a classic at its worst. Is other
like
game
I said,
peak.
due to the amount of games in this video, I had to criminally underreport on some of them. I do want to say that failing to take down one of the most
classic
popular
Elwyn Forest
cultural
OST
phenomenons isn't really a statement on their quality. Many of the games listed here were and are successful in their own right, and a lot of their issues aren't even their own fault, especially in the cases of just bad timing on their release, or perhaps their publishers influencing them in negative ways. I think in the future I would like to cover these individually to give them the more proper respect that
WoW
they deserve.
has music.
It could be a fun little mini-series for the channel, so let me know if you'd like to see that. Aside from that, I hope...
Yeah, damn, what an insane video for Matt's season show. Again, I love this guy content so much. Like, I'm gonna leave a link in the description. Guys, obviously watch it for yourself. Give him a like and a sub. This man is genuinely, insanely talented. I love every single video of his, but I'm not gonna lie. How have I not heard about Rift? That game looked kinda goated. I might just check it out, a few videos about that. I mean, it did look extremely interesting, but to just kind of summarize everything, yeah. Every game that aspired to be a WoW killer end up dying instead.